Do any of you have any giants you'd like to overcome? You know, and you just don't know how. You haven't found your bag of 5 stones to go. Except he did it with 1 stone. Boom. He had 4 other stones that he used later on for the giants that come in 2 Samuel. But he only used the 1 stone in 1 Samuel towards Goliath. And it's like, but we have to look at what is Goliath in our modern thought, and how, of course it's our thoughts. It's our very old modern thoughts. And it's I'm going to read a little bit about this today because it's easier. Because I don't want to miss out on the information here. Now the funny part about Goliath, you know, he's this giant Philistine, which is about sense consciousness, that is terrorizing the town and is challenging. You know, if you can overcome me, fine. Then you can take us over. And now he came to battle with little Goliath. And this is what he wore.
Little David?
That's what I meant, thank you. Little David. Little David, not little Goliath. There was big Goliath, little David. Big Goliath is about 6 cubits high. He has 6 pieces of armor, and his spearhead weighs 600 shekels. Now, if you'll notice there are 3 6s, which is a sign of the, not devil, beast, sign of the beast. It's the sign of the beast. Now, if Goliath is a thought, it's a beastly thought within us. That our Goliath is a beastly thought inside. So what Goliath is, because 666 really represents the ego, that's what the beast is, our ego. It's our ego fighting to be in charge. Now, we're not here to hate the ego. I don't want to hate any aspect of us. Clearly, it's all built. We built it all for a divine experience of some sort. So we're not here to hate any aspect of us. I want to be very clear about this. You know, don't hate your guilt. Don't hate your powerlessness. Don't hate your addictions. Don't hate any of it. If it is true, and I believe it is true, as God is for me, nothing could be against me, then it's not about that. It's about something else. To me, it's about misuse of my God powers. It's misuse of things. So, but to get clarity on all this, because, well, let me go on a little further. I think it's too easy for someone in my position to say, well, your ego is bad, and, you know, if you didn't have your stupid ego, that, you know, and then, you all going to leave here loving yourself? No. Am I going to leave here loving myself? No. I want to love myself. I want to love myself while I'm here and when I walk out the door. And that's what I want to offer all of us, is a chance to rethink everything. So to get a clearer understanding of the ego rather than to just dismiss it, oh, my ego's bad and hates me and I'm bad because I have an ego. No, 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 no. I think that's ridiculous and I think that's abuse. I think that's a tremendous amount of abuse. But to get clarity on how to go with spirit, rather than the ego running the show. So, here was, David has 5 stones. 5 stones, perhaps they come up with 5 components of ourselves, of our sense consciousness. 1, form, which is our body, you know, matter. The other is feelings or emotions. The other is cognition, our memory and our thoughts. The other is volition, our free will, our desire. Remember last week we talked about misuse of our free will. And then we have consciousness, or the self-awareness, or the I. And those help to make up the ego and give us the unique and individualistic experience we call life. You know, those aspects are how we're using life. We're using the body and all of the form and the matter around us. And our feelings and our emotions are very important, aren't they? They become more important than spirit, than truth. You know, what I think and what I feel becomes so much more important than what I am. And we keep coming back here, and we keep opening up our books to try to remember, and we keep putting down things that aren't working for us any longer in order to remember our I am. the I am of me, because that's what will not change. The I am of me is consistent, and that's what's fantastic, and that's why I like New Thought, because it explains it this way. And and then our memories and our thoughts. One of my favorite lessons from Course in Miracles, Course in Miracles. Course in Miracles is, it says, I see only the past. Because that made sense to me, because that's where I'm making so many of my decisions from. I'm using the misinformation from my past, not because I'm stupid, but because I keep forgetting that I have a present, and that I have a presence, and that this is new. This moment is new. This isn't that moment. It feels a lot like it. If one of you yells at me, it may bring back a time my mother was unkind or abusive, and so I'm thinking it's the same thing, and I'm reacting as if it's the same thing, and that's the misuse. That's the misuse of this moment. I need to go right into the present now to realize what's happening, because it's not the present then. But my ego will say, see, same thing keeps happening. No matter how hard I try, the same thing keeps happening. I disagree. It is not the same. I have new information that I am dealing with this from, even though it feels so familiar. Let me ask you this. Have you ever released someone from your life only to have them show up in disguise? In a whole new body. And they say all the right things for a while. And then suddenly they turn into that old person again. Well, bless that person, so that you could finally heal this relationship, so they don't have to keep showing up. It's not about, I gotta get rid of this one. Now I gotta get rid of this one. Now I gotta get rid of this one. How many have you gotten rid of that he or she keeps showing up? How many bodies does your mother keep showing up in? Your father, your cousin, your uncle, Mrs. Karabi from third grade, whoever. Just at random. So then we have the volition, or our free will. Our free will, our desire. One of the greatest fortune cookies I ever received was, temptation is a suggestion, not a command. Just because I desire a certain feeling doesn't mean I have to act on it. And I have proven that over and over again when I said, geez, I think I'd have been better to sit with how I felt rather than acting on that. I remember once I had 7 hot dogs, and I was a lot thinner then, but I thought, can you die from eating 7 hot dogs? But the desire for that sensation of the texture, the taste, everything, and then I went to work, it was way before I came to Unity, and I thought, I hate myself right now. Now that's a mild thing compared to some of the things I have hated myself for giving into, some of my temptations, some of my desires, that after the fact, when it seemed like, oh, this will just make things so much better, didn't. Just didn't make things so much better. And in fact, suddenly I had a secret, suddenly I had shame, suddenly I had regret, suddenly it's like, oh man, couldn't you have just sat still for 5 minutes and waited for it to pass? And apparently I couldn't. Now, many things over the years now, I have learned how to sit still for 5 minutes and wait for it to pass before I said something, did something. Well, that's about it. Before I said something or did something, because I could think about it, and if I am willing to acknowledge love in the midst of my mind, then I begin the overcoming of the egoic mind. And then consciousness, the self-awareness. Now there's a difference between self-aware and self-conscious. Self-consciousness is what ruins our day. Just turns what could have been a delightful experience, a delightful, trusting experience, into a complete sense of, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I am. I see it a lot on stage. When people, I say the difference between self-conscious and God-conscious. God-conscious is assurance that no matter what happens now, I'm still good. Self-conscious is, they're all looking at me. Well, of course they are. You're on stage. You know? But then they're all judging me. I could tell by the look in his eye. I could tell by the way she looked at me out there. I could tell. It's like, no, you couldn't. You could think that. You could think that. Years ago, I was on a cruise ship. David and I were, it was a Unity cruise, and I was early on, and I was giving the workshop, and David was part of that workshop. We're in the disco of the cruise ship is where we were giving this, opposite Edwin Gaines, no less. And I remember my self-consciousness, when I found out I was opposite Edwin, I called them. I said, what's the point of me doing a workshop opposite Edwin? Who's going to come to mine? And she said, well, so far you have 35 registered. And I said, okay. But one particular Unity minister who I did not know well sat in the front row like this the entire time. And I had thoughts about that. And then I gossiped about it for a few years until I became friendly with him. And then I brought it up to him. I said, do you know you sat in the front row of my workshop like that? And he said, really? I was probably studying you. You were wonderful. So what do I know about what's on your face? I've had some of you apologize. Shawn, I'm sorry if I look down during your talk. I never take any of that personally here. As I said, off stage I'll take it personally, but while I'm up here, I cannot be bothered to take any of your stuff personally, or any of mine, quite frankly. At least right now, I'm in the love and the light, and that's how I see it. And so, self-consciousness versus self-awareness. Your self-awareness is your awareness that God and I are one. In fact, could we take the and out of that? God, I, one. God, I, one. God, I, one. So that there is not even an and, because we keep putting that and in there. You know, God, you, I, one. You know, to start thinking differently. To open ourselves up, because that way we are overcoming that giant. And I'll tell you the biggest giant. The giant is the and. The and is my giant, is my Goliath that I have to overcome. Because as long as I think there's you and me, I'm finding ways we can disagree instead of how we are one. And quite frankly, you know, if I came up and kicked one of you in the shins right now, you're going to put a big and between us, aren't you? You know, maybe some of you have risen up in that vibration to say, oh, that's just Shawn kicking me in the shins, no big deal. I wonder what I was thinking to bring that about. And that's all. I want to read something from Charles Fillmore's Metaphysical Bible and Dictionary. And it is about Goliath. And what Fillmore says there, it says here, ideas are not all the same importance, or not all of the same importance. Some are large and strong, and some are weak and small. There are aggressive, domineering ideas like Goliath. So now let's associate Goliath with an idea. So there are aggressive, domineering ideas like Goliath that parade themselves prominently, brag about their power, and with fearful threats of disaster, keep us frightened into submission to their unrighteous reign. Do any of you have any of those kind of ideas floating through your mind right now that tell you no matter how hard you try, you're going to fail? No matter what you think, no matter how you try to apply these principles, you're going to fail. That may be fine for Shawn, that may be fine for somebody else, but it's not going to work for me. You know, sure, others can forgive and they get good stuff. Others can tithe and they get good stuff. Others can do this and they get good stuff. That's that strong, aggressive idea that says everybody but you is good. Even if you're thinking somebody else isn't good, if you're thinking they're not good, you're thinking you're not good. Do we clear on this in this political time?
Yeah.
When you think another person isn't good, you think you're not good. Let's start to get into God beings in this climate in the world. Everybody's a God being, and then the rest is personality. Whether you like their personality or not, do not dismiss their God selves. I want to be very clear on that. Vote for whoever you want. It doesn't matter. God couldn't care less who you vote for, which is painful to some of us, but God doesn't care who we vote for. How about that? Because God's not that kind of a person. So, these domineering ideas of error have one argument. I love this. One argument that they impress upon us at all times. Fear of results, should we dare to meet them openly and oppose their reign in consciousness. The fear of opposing prevailing ideas, although we know them to be erroneous, is woven into our whole mental fabric. It's why many of us will not even gently confront our Goliaths, small and large, our Goliaths, because we are so afraid that they'll yell at us, that they'll call us names, that they'll reject us, that they will say, how could you even ask for such a thing? What if it doesn't matter what they think? What if what matters is you begin the peace reign by asking? Not confronting, asking. You know, by going to a being. And I had this teacher who I felt abused me in 7th grade. Hit me. Threw me in a closet. Accused me of things that were not true. But, here's the deal. I was too ashamed of my home life to tell him the truth. I was too embarrassed of how we lived at that time to tell him the truth. And so I took his accusations. And 2 years ago, I found him on Facebook. And I reached out. And he called me. Now, unfortunately, this one, he's about 100 years old and didn't have a clue what I was talking about. And I wasn't nasty. I tried to talk it out, though, because I thought, this has been living in my gut for all these years. But he didn't understand, and I let it go. But I reached out to heal, to see if he would enable me, help me in my healing. Not to say you are a terrible person and how dare you do this, but to be able to say, you know, when this happened, what were you thinking? What were you thinking when this happened? And I'll tell you what I was thinking, and this is how so for me, I had a healing. I have no idea what he had. But you see, there are ways to do this. Somebody came to me once. They were having issues because as children, one of their brothers did some damage to them. But they were both children. And now they're in their 40s at this point. This is several years ago, but they were both in their 40s. And this person's support group said, you have to confront him. And friends said, you have to confront him. It's like, well, wait a minute, there's 2 years age. You were 10 and your brother was 12. Or I think you were 8 and your brother was 10. I said, I said, what if you went to your brother and said, I need your help? I need your help to understand something. Because I could clearly see, and I'd never met his brother, rejecting you have to do this. Nobody has to. Nobody has to help us heal. Let's be very clear on that. Nobody has to. But I said, why don't you ask your brother for help, for clarity? Ask what he was thinking, because you were both children. And he did. And now he has a healthy relationship with his brother, because he didn't go attacking. He didn't go punishing for what another child did. And I recently, in the past year, I found somebody I was unkind to, really unkind to, in 6th grade. We haven't seen each other since. But I found him and I apologized. He's never acknowledged it. But I wrote a letter of apology to him, because I want to clean up my street. I want to clean up my head. I want to clean up my head so that I'm not living with these big and small ideas that there is something bad about me. I don't want to keep thinking I'm defective. You know, in 12 Steps we hear about defects of character. But many of you have heard me say before, we have one defective character, and that's our unwillingness to accept our divinity. Everything else is just a symptom of that. You know, that we're liars and thieves and what have you. And murderers, you know, character assassinate. I don't know if any of you have killed anybody, I don't know. It's none of my business. But I do know, I've sat with some of you and character assassinated. And it's, I don't want to think of myself in those terms anymore. I don't want there to be any sect, any religion, any politician, any race, anything that I think is better or less fortunate. I don't want to see the separation. I want to see the togetherness. And so I clean myself up. I take my Goliaths. I keep looking, and I keep finding so many. It's astonishing to me how many I can find. And can I forgive myself for having so many? Even in getting healthy, how many more I have developed in my recovery, in my healing. How many more I have developed of Goliaths. I find new ones. As I get older, I find my neuroses getting stronger, you know, the mice thing and what have you. And it's like, and I justify it. So now I've dug into, personally, I've dug into a new healing modality, and I found mentors for it to take me deeper, because I don't want my self-consciousness or my oversensitivity to continue. I don't want to have to justify why I should be afraid, because there is no reason why I should be afraid. If it is true, and I believe it is, that as God is for me, nothing could be against me, then I, as little David, you know David means beloved? No, it doesn't. David is God.
Beloved.
Beloved? Oh no, Shawn is God's gift. Shawn means God's gift, or Shawn means God's gift. So my middle name is David, so I'm God's beloved gift, is what that means literally. Isn't that nice? I like it. You all find out the meaning of yours. But so my friend Greg Nittler wrote, when we love truth rather than error, we are inspired to overcome the manifestation of error belief, to accept Goliath's challenge, knowing that the love of truth is the only defense we need from error. Y'all hear me? The love of truth, capital T truth, that which is no opposite, is the only defense we need from our error thinking. We do not connect our sense of I am with the error. We take up the word of truth, or the stone, with concentration, meaning the sling, and we let fly the transforming power of affirmation, either silently or loud. This error has no power over me. Only truth has the power to heal me now. And I am willing to love the truth. Could we say that together? I am willing to love the truth. Say it again. I am willing to love the truth. One more time. I am willing to love the truth. Keep affirming that as you continue to believe it. Thank you so much.